Good afternoon, everybody. We're just waiting a couple of minutes for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. All right. I guess let's kick things off. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicole. I am one of the pre-sale solutions consultants here at Bytes. Welcome to the Intelligent Data Governance and Protection session. I've been with Bytes a couple of years now, focusing on Microsoft security feature sets and product suites. And I've been here for a couple of years as well. And yeah, I'll be taking you through this data governance and protection session. Just a few notes on the housekeeping. Everybody has been muted, but if you have any questions at all, either throughout the session or as we go along, please put them in the chat box or feel free to email them to tell me more at bytes.co.uk. I will have some time at the end of the session to go through any of your questions, if there are any. And just for you to be aware, the session is being recorded and it will be available on demand afterwards. And lastly, we do have a poll at the end. Please take some time to answer the poll and give us some of your feedback. Okay, so let's kick things off. In the last 6 months, every compliance-related conversation I have had has included at least one of the elements up on your screens. Either customers don't know where all their data sits, or they do, but have no way of controlling what it is or where it's sent externally. Everybody wants to secure their data and meet GDPR regulations. Others want to manage their data more efficiently, but generally, all of our customers are having the same or similar challenges with remote workers and effectively controlling how they work and what endpoints they're using. We're all pretty much in the same boat. So what I'm going to cover today around intelligent compliance and risk management solutions is going to effectively be, these 4 pillars. So first, we understand that compliance can have different meanings to various teams across the enterprise. It's an outcome of continuous risk management involving risk, legal, privacy, security, IT, and even often HR and finance teams as well. But to start at kind of the base pillar, which is compliance management, this is all about simplifying your risk assessments and mitigating your risks in a more automated way, providing better visibility and insights to meet your compliance requirements, whatever they may be. Information protection and governance is more about helping you to know your data better, to protect and govern your data throughout its life cycle. This is often the key starting point for many of our customers in their modern compliance journey, knowing what sensitive data they have, putting flexible and user-friendly policies in place for DLP or for security, and also using a lot more of that automation and intelligence to manage those data life cycles. Insider risk management, these are often internal risks, and what usually keep our business leaders up at night, regardless of whether people are negligent or malicious. Being able to identify and take action on any internal risks is becoming more and more critical. The ability to quickly identify and manage risks from insiders, whether they be employees or contractors, and minimize the negative impact of them is more and more important, especially in a competitive business position, brand reputation. It's more and more of a priority as we go along. Um, and kind of the last pillar, or certainly not the least pillar, is about discovery and response. So being able to discover relevant data for internal investigations or for litigation, for regulatory requests, and respond to those effectively and efficiently. And doing that without having to use multiple solutions, multiple providers to move that data in and out of systems as well. So let's kick things off into a bit more detail, starting with information protection and governance. So any vendor worth its salt, when providing an information protection and governance solution, will have four main areas at the forefront of their minds. And this is regardless of where the data sits or how it's managed or what the data is. The growth of data is blurring those traditional organizational boundaries nowadays, with remote workers, collaboration happening across different geographies, etc. It's making it protecting data and governing data more and more challenging as we go along. So because it's shared and stored across many locations like devices, apps, cloud services, on-prem, the evolving compliance landscape is getting more and more complex. So with Microsoft solutions, what Microsoft is trying to do with their compliance solutions is give just a little bit more flexibility to implement some of these controls to meet your internal and external security and compliance requirements. Knowing your data, protecting your data, governing your data are all outcomes that are powered by their new features and their new solutions in their compliance suites. So this includes a common approach to data classification, no matter where the data resides, a unified policy configuration and management experience for IT, dashboards to monitor and remediate any data issues or risk issues that you might find, including APIs that enable you to extend your information protection policies and DLP policies and governance policies to the ecosystems outside of Microsoft, for example. So to get into just a little bit more detail around this, one of the key features of this suite of products is Microsoft Information Protection, or what it used to be called Azure Information Protection. So Azure Information Protection or Microsoft Information Protection now comes in two flavors depending on the type of license you have. It is split into a Plan 1 and Plan 2. Plan 2 mainly being about automating a lot of these capabilities, but what information protection is giving you is the ability to create and define labels to assign to your data. So assigning something like highly confidential or top secret to your documents as an example. Once you have those labels, you can also have sensitive information types like GDPR, PII, credit card information, etc. The protections that they have now apply a policy based on the label that you've selected or that you've created to either watermark or prevent that data from being sent externally, or whether that data should actually be stored encrypted and make sure it's securely sent to the right people, for example. So applying the labels and policies can either be manual, so your users have to assign a label, which would require time to adopt and train, or it can be done automatically where an information protection scanner scans through your data and automatically assigns those labels to that data. And that's that key differentiator between Plan 1 and Plan 2. The second key feature around data protection is DLP for Microsoft Teams. Not necessarily a new feature. but has been added to the compliance licensing suite. And what you need to be conscious of as well is the licensing requirements around this, because they've separated it from, some of the standard E3 licensing suites that you have. So that if it's something you're considering, that's a key thing to remember there. But effectively, DLP for Teams can be quickly deployed to automatically block messages that contain sensitive information. And that's in channels or in Teams chats. And while it does that, it also helps educate users to protect that critical data. So using labels and policies that you've already created, perhaps that you already use in OneDrive or SharePoint potentially, and extending those same policies to include Teams, channels and chats. And yeah, as I mentioned, it works quite seamlessly. We've implemented it on our side as well. As the image suggests, that if you try and do something, it tells you this has been blocked based on policy, and effectively, you shouldn't be sending stuff like this over Teams or the chat or the channels. So that's DLP for Teams at a high level. Microsoft information governance is kind of the next key feature around information protection. So information governance and records management gives you the ability to retain data and manage your records based on policies that you set. They've now included apps like LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter that you can integrate as data connectors and extend your compliance policies and retention policies to those platforms. And with these tools, you can also demonstrate proof of disposal and audit trails for any of these apps that you're potentially using for data management and data storage. The next pillar is then insider risk management. So internal risks, like I mentioned, there's some of the risks that keep the business leaders up at night. How to identify them, how to manage them, what happens after the case. And there's quite a broad range of risk and violations. Some might not necessarily be applicable to everybody, but it is hard to maintain trust without the right visibility and processes and control. The effort required to identify the risks and violations is not trivial if you don't have a solution in place that can help do this for you. If you think about the number of people accessing resources, communicating with each other, people coming and going from the business, how do you intelligently determine what is an intentional risk versus what is an unintentional one? And how do you have a level of visibility while still meeting your privacy requirements and legal requirements, etc. So, for example, truly malicious insiders do things such as intentionally steal your data, turn off security controls, harassing other people at work. But there are many more situations in which an insider might not even know that they're causing a risk to you and violating those policies. Um, so there's tools in place with the compliance suite now to help monitor and create policies to address some of these risks. One of those particular features is called insider risk management. So it's leveraging Microsoft Graph and other services to obtain signals from Office, from Windows, from Azure, including things like file activity, communication sentiment, abnormal user behaviors. And it's also got the ability to link into your HR systems. Not every single one are supported, but a good number of HR systems are built into that API integration. And what it does is it gives you some configurable playbooks tailored specifically for risks such as digital IP theft, confidentiality breaches, security violations, and it's using all of those great things like machine learning and intelligence to monitor all of those activities and identify hidden patterns and risks that traditional or manual methods might miss. So it correlates all of this information and allows the solution to focus on actual suspicious activities so you don't get overloaded with alerts. Furthermore, display names for risky users can be pseudonymized. So if, for example, you only want your HR people to be seeing the names of people that are breaching, these policies, for example, you can hide that kind of detail. It gives quite a, I want to say, 360-degree view, and it's easy to understand, very easy to set up the policies. If I have managed to get some time, I'll definitely try and show you some of that. But it includes historical timelines and the activities and trends over time for each identified user that's at risk. And with the workflows integrated with HR systems and legal systems, it makes it easier to investigate and to take action once a risk has been identified. So for example, if the risk was determined to be unintentional, I could send an email saying this is a violation of company policy with a link to training or a handbook. If the risk was determined to be malicious, I could open an investigation within Insider Risk Management that would collate and preserve all of the evidence that it's collected to support this, including the documents, and open a case for legal and HR to take appropriate actions. Linked quite closely to Insider Risk Management is a feature called Communication Compliance. It's relatively new, and it effectively tries to help organizations address code of conduct policy violations in how people communicate. It also helps organizations that are in regulated industries meet certain supervisory compliance requirements. So what it does, it supports a number of channels like Teams, Skype for Business, Twitter, Facebook, and it provides granularity in identifying specific words and phrases with some out-of-the-box models to identify things like sexual harassment, people using a lot of profanity, for example, or threats, for example, to other staff. And it can start to build a picture and show you the kind of things that people are communicating about so that they can be monitored and investigated. I'm sure there's probably some blurry lines around privacy, etc., but they've made it quite seamless in how it works. Again, names can be hidden just if you wanted HR to be able to see those names, but effectively you can train it to understand meaning and context with a feature called trainable classifiers, so that if you monitor things like insider training or unethical practice, you can see that pretty much right away and prevent a lot of those false positives. Once a violation has been flagged in communications compliance, the designated supervisor is alerted, and then there's a review process that enables them to act on that particular violation. It includes features like historical user context on past violations. It threads conversations together, highlighting keywords to make your life easy as you're reading through it and doing your investigation. So it's quite an intuitive tool. If that's something that's potentially going to make sense for you in your particular environment. But the dashboard provides quite an effective way to manage those communications risks that potentially could be getting missed. So yeah, that is communications compliance. In the third pillar around discovery and responding, this is mainly about how you can filter and search through data. I mean, we know that data is exploding and it's posing serious challenges for all of our customers alike. In the new world where internal requirements, external pressures from legal and regulatory teams, they're all evolving and becoming more complex. If you deal with businesses that are in other countries, they might have their own data requirements as well. And this is a challenge that everybody is facing. But the ability to discover data efficiently and cost effectively, that is not as straightforward. And this is one of the things I like about EDiscovery with Microsoft. It's about making that ability to search through data and collect data, and make that easier to do without having to, pull out data teams and get your third party vendors involved to try and collect all that data for you. So let me just build out the slide. If you think back to just about 5 years ago, how would you have been able to search through Exchange and SharePoint and collect all of the data in a single place from one search engine? It just wasn't possible, and it was quite painful. So EDiscovery, with the data in various M365 workloads, as well as non-M365 workloads that you ingest into your environment, are indexed, and they allow these searches to be performed without any movement of data or requiring any additional time to prepare data to be searched. The in-place review tools and analytics that are available with advanced e-discovery help you to further reduce that data volume, the data volumes, and prepare data for things like attorney reviews if you have to do investigations in a well-organized manner. So over and above that, the efficiency and cost savings, the reduction of risks, it can't be understated when you have to actually pull all of this data together and search through all of this data to identify those particular events and tools. So EDiscovery is a magnificent tool, and I've done a few searches. You know, when it works, it's really, really quick, a couple of seconds, and you can pull quite a lot of data together. So one of the good features from Microsoft there around data discovery. What advanced EDiscovery also enables you to do is give you the ability to do custodian management. So if you have to take things to court, for example, but there is no complex scripting to identify URLs and mailboxes. You literally, if you're investigating Nicole, you go to eDiscovery, you type in Nicole Chesworth, it searches through everything, including my Teams chats, my emails, all of my documents, and it puts it all into one place, and you can pretty much read everything. So it's not permission I would give to just about anybody, but puts it all into one place so you can search through that information and isolate that information as well. When you run a search, it's tuned for performance. So data that is ingested is indexed as it is ingested and not after the fact. That's why I say the searches run really, really quickly. You can then review and manage data and redact data as in when you need to as well. All of this, you know, running in the background with machine learning removes duplicates, and it identifies content relatively simply. So yeah, one of my more favorite tools out of the MS suite are around data discovery. The fourth pillar is compliance management. We sometimes forget that even when using these cloud tools like Microsoft, that there's always a shared responsibility model for your data backups, as well as your data accountability, data classification, and data management. So when you leverage these IT estates, you know, if it's on premise, you have complete responsibility to protect that data and to implement controls on that data to meet those standards. When you use cloud services, however, the burden does become considerably less, but there's still a responsibility between the customer and the cloud service provider to do that data classification and accountability. So it's very important to remember that even though Microsoft is there to, you know, provide these fantastic solutions, ultimately the data that sits in their solutions is our responsibility and we're accountable for it. So we have to keep that in mind when looking at compliance tools or backup tools or anything of the sort when it comes to data governance and compliance. Microsoft's Compliance Manager and Compliance Score, they help you simplify your compliance environment and reduce compliance-related risks. It makes it easy for IT admins and compliance stakeholders to help the organizations manage all of these data protection controls and meet compliance requirements. So even if you're not an expert in something like GDPR, you can still quickly learn the actions recommended for you to progress to a GDPR compliance score, so to speak. So with Microsoft Compliance Score, you can continually assess and monitor all of your data protection controls, your configuration within M365, and then get clear guidance on how you can improve your score and reduce some of those compliance risks, for example. And you can leverage all of the built-in controls that are there and the built-in assessments that are there to meet these, compliance standards relatively simply. Those continuous assessments scan through and detect system settings. They're constantly and automatically updating any technical controls. So if you change a setting, it will automatically pick that up and adjust your score if necessary. So it's quite intuitive. However, what I would say around compliance score is you've got to make sure that it's specific for your environment. The baseline setting, or I don't want to say free version, but what you get with the compliance license suite, Microsoft has built their own data governance assessment that can include things like NIST and a bunch of other compliance regulations. You can absolutely tailor it to just GDPR, for example, if that's what you have to monitor, so that the compliance score makes more sense. What they have done around the compliance manager is separate some of those additional assessments. So something like Cyber Essentials is part of an add-on that you have to pay for, which is not great, but they've done that relatively recently. So what you can do is get those assessments, add them into your environment, and effectively check yourself against all of those assessments with the recommended actions and the points, etc. So you can improve your score with the recommended actions and solutions. It provides you those improvement actions in whichever area, including information protection, device management, information governance. It also allows you to easily understand the contribution you're making towards the overall compliance strategy. So each action has a different impact on your score, depending on the potential risk involved. So you can prioritize important actions accordingly. Risk managers and compliance professionals can assess controls using those assessments, like I mentioned, so GDPR, ISO 27001, et cetera, et cetera. There were hundreds of them in there. But it also helps you make connections between each regulatory requirement that you have and the solutions that can help you enhance that control. So it's helping you build towards that compliance goal, so to speak. There is built-in control mapping as well. So with more than about 200 updates, 1,000 regulatory bodies, I think, that are uploading all of their structures and regulations and standards, there's all sorts of information in there that can be useful. But obviously, you want it to make sense for you. So definitely adjusting how it assesses would be something I'd recommend anybody to do. So yeah, at a high level, that's compliance score. I've noted that I've gone about an half an hour in. Let me just see if there's any questions, and potentially we can demo some of these elements as well. Can communications compliance pick out words from Teams conversations that are taped? I'm not sure about the taped element, to be honest. I do know that it works with Teams, but I'm not sure about the taped. I will definitely follow up on that question for you there. Can bespoke assessments be created in compliance score? Absolutely. For personally, that makes the most sense to me, is to build out what you need. So you can extract some of the assessments into a Excel spreadsheet, for example, add your own bits in, pull another assessment and make, put two together. You can absolutely do that and then import it back into compliance score. And they've built out the template for you to do that. They've made it relatively easy as well. But let's actually see if I can show you just some of that. I'm guessing you can only see the presentation at the moment. Bear with. So this is my demo environment. It's currently got an E5 compliance license, so I've got all the features available. To answer your question around those assessments, so if you go to Compliance Manager, hopefully it will load up relatively soon, you'll see there's different tabs. and there's different assessments that you can use around that. So once you've got a list of assessments, as you can see, the built-in one, data protection baseline, this is the one Microsoft uses that they've defaulted to. It might not necessarily make sense for you, but there are templates that you can assign. So these templates appear, EU GDPR, ISO 27001, NIST are built into the solution, so you don't have to pay for that add-on that I was referring to. And then the premium templates are down here, and these are all sorts of other countries. Cyber Essentials, unfortunately, is also a premium template, but these are some of the built-in ones that you can use. You can create an entirely new template and include the different controls, and you can also change what the assessment uses. So under the assessments page, it's defaulted to that data protection one, but I can add an assessment and adjust it to what's relevant for us. And then my compliance score after that will be relevant to that particular assessment. So at a high level, you've got your compliance score, 77%. It shows you the different controls. I've got some retention label usage happening. There's a minimal DLP policy in there, and just some high level information around who's sharing the most files, Megan B. But these are some of the basic dashboards you can get. Useful one, this is a combination of some of the compliance tools, but also Cloud App Security potentially to pick up this volume file deletion, and then some of those communications risk under communication compliance. So I want to be able to take everybody through everything, but I'll go through this quite quickly because I know I don't have you for much longer. On the data classification, this is where your sensitive information types sit, and you can build those out to whatever makes sense effectively for your business. So there's a lot of default templates, like I mentioned, but you can create just specific for GDPR or for PII or whatever's relevant to yourselves. Relatively new feature that they've included is the data connectors. So this is about extending your compliance and your compliance settings to your data connectors. So if you've got something like Facebook for Business, for example, which is still in preview, you can start to apply some of those data retention policies, DLP policies, to these third-party tools if you integrate them into compliance. At a high level, then, the communications compliance that I was referencing earlier, it's relatively straightforward. There are quite a few templates that you can create around monitoring offensive language, for example. And honestly, it's just about, creating a policy. What do you want to monitor, and where do you want to monitor those particular communications? So that is relatively straightforward to set up. It works quite well. Insider risk management that I referenced earlier, again, they've made it quite simple in terms of how you can create those policies, what you can monitor with those policies is as simple as, I'll show you. Create a policy, name it, provide the users what content you want to prioritize, and then what will trigger an event and the different settings that you can make from that. So data theft is a default one, for example, and if you name it, you can include all of your users. If you want to specify specific SharePoint sites, specific sensitivity labels, you can absolutely do that. And then you can start to add what triggers those particular events, how you want to handle an event, what exactly should trigger an alert if you don't want to be monitoring everything. Like if somebody is removing a sensitivity label, do you want to be notified of that? Or if they're deleting a SharePoint file. So they've made it quite simple and straightforward to set up. of course, this is all assuming your data sitting in M365 or being ingested or connected to M365 in some way for it to apply to the different data levels. But yeah, that's insider risk management at a high level. DLP specifically, also quite simple. If you have a E5 license, sorry, for your compliance suite, you now have endpoint DLP settings where you can start to do a little bit more in terms of what browsers can be used, what file paths should be excluded, what apps should be allowed or disallowed, for example. But the policies that would apply, to everything are also quite straightforward to set up. If you start to pick, well, financial, for example, you'll see there's a whole lot of options that are built in templates. If PCI is something that's of interest, and name the policy. Again, where you can apply the policy is quite important. So if you don't have that particular license I referenced for Teams, you just won't be able to turn this on. But you can then select where those policies should apply, um, on which devices, and then those repositories. So if you've got a connector to SharePoint on-prem or file shares, you can connect those repositories into the compliance suite of products so that you can apply all of these policies to that data as well. Also, quite simply, some of the settings you can create and customize. I mean, they've not made it very complicated, but obviously with DLP rules, you've got to be quite cautious because they need tuning. You don't want to end up making life harder for people. So you can start to play around with some of the settings there around what should be detected, and you can test it out, turn it on, keep it off, and it's quite straightforward. So this is there's a lot to unpack in all of the compliance tools. I want to be able to go into detail with you, but unfortunately, I don't have the whole day to do that, and I'm conscious it's the end of the day for everyone. But uh, how we can help effectively is, you know, there are compliance workshops. I can run through overviews of the different sessions of the different tools. I can demo quite a lot of the tools as well as my team. But the compliance workshops will go into a lot more detail over a couple of days, show you how potentially you can go down that path. Microsoft does like funding them. So if that's something you would be interested in, certainly reach out to us. I think the poll will ask that as well. Fast track to help you adopt some of these technologies, certainly something that you can do. And also, the licensing does get complicated. So we've got licensing specialists if you need help understanding what exactly is going to be included in your current suite, what's it compared to, with an E5 suite, etc. We can certainly have those discussions around the features and capabilities available within the different licensing SKUs. Just conscious of the Q&A, bespoke assessments created. Yeah, so hopefully I showed you a bit of the bespoke assessments there. But if you'd like to, chat about that a bit more, then please, reach out to your account manager and have a chat with me around that. And we'll run through it in a bit more detail for you. I note your question around operating if it's connected to on-prem file servers. That is only if you connect those repositories and file shares into M365. There's certain licensing requirements around that, a little bit of work around that to make sure that data is actually connecting back to M365 so you can apply those policies there. But it's absolutely possible. We've seen it done. It does take a little bit of work, but it's absolutely possible. Also, very quickly, there is a poll if there's no other questions from everybody. But I'll give you a moment in case you've thought of questions with me talking away to put those into the chat box. But please, do fill out the poll. It's just about whether you would be interested in, looking at a compliance workshop in more detail. If there's any help or support you'd like from us to kind of take you through any of these, that would be great. But yeah, I hope that was useful to everybody. I'm conscious there's no more questions coming through. But if you think of anything, of course, you've got your account manager. You've got tell me more at bytes.co.uk. Please do contact us, and we'd be happy to talk through some of these elements, debate some of them as well if you'd like. And yeah, that is me for the day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for staying with me. I know it's the end of the day. I hope the session was useful. And yes, I hope to chat to some of you soon. Thank you, everybody.